Hi, friends and family,
Welcome to Hope After Addiction
with your hosts, Katie Comer.
and Chelsea McLeod.
Hi, welcome to Hope After Addiction. We are so happy you joined us today. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Nothing else to say there.
Nothing new.
No, we've recorded a few today, and so I think we're kind of out of stuff
Yep.
that's going on in our lives.
Yep.
Yeah, no. It's when y'all listen to this, she might have already had her baby. That's what we said last week.
She is wild right now. Sorry.
Is he? I know you keep like rubbing
I
on
know,
your
I'm like,
belly.
what are you doing?
Is he rolling in there?
Yeah, he wants to speak.
Is he pretty active?
Very active, yeah.
Oh man.
I
You're in for a
know.
treat.
I am. Another little monkey in the house.
I know. Ella was quite the opposite. I feel like I said this on there.
Said that, yeah.
Where I was like, "You good?"
I'd
And
be
she'd
drinking
like,
sugar all the time. I just need to feel you.
She would just hit me, and then she'd go back to say,
That's hilarious.
"I was like, I'm all right with it.
Yeah,
You
that
come
is
out
true.
just like that.
Yes. Stay calm.
Sleep all the time."
Yep.
And she did. She was a pretty good babe.
She still is. So
She
cute.
was a good babe.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so we hope that y'all are doing well today. Today we're going to be talking about how God is not done with your story. So be encouraged. That might be fearful.
I think Katie's going to do a song for us today, actually.
No, I'm not. Stop. There is a song that you can play, Carlos,
Yes.
if you want to.
Yep.
Or you want to come up here and sing. He's a singer.
Oh, he's a great singer.
He's a great singer. Okay.
He's actually fully prepared right now.
Bring your guitar out. Let's go.
Yes.
No, but God is not done with your story. That might not be encouraging to you, but it might be encouraging to
It's
you.
true.
I think it's encouraging
I do too.
because if you go back and listen to our last episode, I mean, there's highs and lows in your journey, and even the lows, and you talk about it a lot, even the lows bring up such great growth.
They do.
And so God not being done with your story yet can offer some great encouragement to you. And I hope it does. It might be a little fearful. You're like,
Yeah.
well, what does that mean? What does that mean? He's not done with my story yet.
Yeah.
But, I look forward to seeing what God does in my story.
Yeah.
It's like a to be continued type constantly, unveiling new stuff in my life and teaching me new stuff in my life. I've been through a lot in my marriage, personally. And so I'm like tempted to be like, all right, I'm good.
Great. Yep.
And we're good. Let's just roll it out. But I mean, ultimately, I just know that that's not true.
It's not. And I think about this like in your lows, and we all have lows. You
Yeah.
know, I think about wayward children or infertility, addiction, death, all the things. And it's hard to see out that there is more ahead. And I remember in the lowest points of our addiction story, it was hard for me to see a future. It's the last thing that it was even possible. Or trust. We get that question all the time. How do you ever trust again?
Yeah.
That seemed impossible. But it's not. And I always go back to there is a novel for you that God is writing. There's a novel for Katie. There's a novel for me.
Yeah.
There's a
There's just
novel
chapters.
for and it's just chapters. And so some of those chapters are way more difficult than others. But to embrace it, God is still writing. You're still here. You woke up with breath in your lungs this morning. You still have a story. And we all have one. And if you don't, and you say you don't have lows, buckle up.
You're about
Buckle
to go through one.
Yep.
Or
Buckle up. Because God has like those plans over a purpose, what we talked about in the last episode, purpose for our life.
yeah.
And it's not always easy.
Yeah. Jeremiah 29:11 is my favorite verse.
I love that
It's
verse.
my favorite verse of the whole Bible.
Is it?
Uh-huh.
It's so good.
It is. If there's a trivia question,
I was
that's
going to
it.
say, I will know that now for the next trivia game we
Highlight
play,
it.
which we need to do that
Put that in
again.
your mind.
Like
Ooh, we
Katie's
do.
favorite.
We need to do a
we
trivia.
do that again.
Yeah. Anyway, but Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And while you are battling something, if you're listening to us, and I know that
Yeah.
there's a lot of our listeners battling
Something. And something big.
something big. This was such an encouragement to me as I read it. And it just spoke so deep into my soul that he has me.
Yeah.
And he has this planned out. And he's not a God that's harming me in any sort of way. He's just there to grow me.
Yep.
And to give me a future that I never would have thought.
No.
And so in the middle of it, I wanted to check him on that.
Yeah, for sure.
But are you sure? This
Yeah.
is here for my good. But it's so true. And it's true for you. It's true for whatever season that you're in. If you're in a season of waiting for your loved one to go into rehab because they are refusing to do so, if you're in a season where you've lost a loved one to addiction, if you're in a season where they're in rehab right now, and there might be a lot of hope, and that's so great. Just know that this verse is meant for you and that he has given you a hope and he is going to give you a future in that.
Yeah, I think it's one of the most hope-giving verses that even in the darkest moments, like if you're in the pits, in the depths of this, to read this verse and to know that his plans are for you. It can change your life and it can help you walk through every day. I mean, if you have to read this 100 times a day, read it. Post it on your mirrors and on your bathroom sink or bathroom wall, all of it. Just post it everywhere.
Yeah.
Memorize it.
Yeah. So a testimony of how God's shown me that he's not done with me yet. So I think there's a couple of times in my life, and you would have, I mean, it's laughable, but like when I got married to Adam, I was like, this is it.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was like 25 when I got married.
Yes.
And I was like, I've gotten married and we're going to have kids. And I just thought that was my story. And God weaved this hard, like wonderful,
Right.
difficult story.
Yep.
That I had no idea was going to happen. And so he was not done with my story. And just when I thought that he was done with it then,
Yeah.
right after getting, out of addiction, we are living our life, ready to have kids. He's like, not done with your story quite yet.
We're at another chapter to this toughness.
Yes. And so it's a little frightening, to be honest with you. But I know he's still not done.
Yeah.
And so, but what I do know is that in the middle of any trials that I might face, right? Because he's not done with our story.
No.
I'm 41. I know that there's a lot of life
Yeah.
left. Whatever happens, I know that he's got me because his story is there to give me a hope.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that's so important is us sitting here, like we have been through so much and we're not ahead of anybody.
Yeah.
Because like I say all the time, the next second we walk out that door, our lives could change drastically. I could get a phone call. You could get a phone call where our lives could change drastically. And he's still writing and he's still growing us and changing us.
Yeah.
And, those examples of testimony, we know how much he's done in our lives and we've seen it. We've felt it. And I always say, like, I know God intimately now because of the pure hell that I've walked through. And I'm forever grateful of that. Forever.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't see out of it, but now I see. Now the blinders are off and the light's there where I was like, okay, God, okay.
And I think that it's important, as I was preparing for this, it's important to know and to tell your story. And I know we talk about this too, but discuss how God has transformed your story. And there's so many people out there that can glean from your wisdom and what you're going through. And it's also therapeutic too, to share your story and to tell others about it, because I feel like it was healing for me just to, sometimes it was hard. I remember when we first started doing this, we've talked about this before, when we first started doing the podcast and I was going back through my notes, I was like, this is just way too raw.
Yeah. Yep.
And it wasn't raw because I hadn't thought about those emotions in so long, but it was so good for me to see where God had brought me from.
That's the thing. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because when you go back to those places, sometimes it's so good to see where God's
Because I don't ever want to forget
story
that. Yeah.
unfolded.
And I say that about, like, I've talked about this with Thanksgiving and Mother's Day and Father's and all those things. Like, yes, they're a day, but it's also a day to reminisce on the beauty that we have. There's a lot of pain in those days too for a lot of people, but I don't ever want to get complacent and forget what God's done. Ever. I was having a conversation with a friend last night about that. I don't ever want to forget, and I need those reminders constantly. I need you to step on my toes when I have forgotten and when pride gets in the way or complacency. Like, remind me, God, what you've done
Yeah.
and how faithful you are.
Honestly, this podcast is very good for you.
It is.
too, because sometimes I'll forget week to week
Oh,
what God's doing and continually doing. And so when we're preparing for this, I'm like, oh yes, God, go.
Yeah,
Go, God.
it's so cool.
Like, it's so good. And it's so difficult at the same time to know, like, the stuff that we've been through and the stuff that y'all are going through, because we know exactly how you're feeling. And so like, we get it, but just find the hope. Sometimes it just takes listening to somebody else say it.
Yep.
Like, God's got you, and he is going to work whatever you're dealing with for his glory.
Yep. And for those of us who love him, and that's the coolest part, is like, what do we have to keep doing to keep getting through this? Love him.
Yeah.
Period. Done.
Yeah. And trusting in his timing.
Yeah.
I've said this before too, like when I was dealing with infertility stuff. I mean, I would have never thought that because it took me so long to get pregnant, I didn't see it, but God saw that my sister got pregnant around the same time I did.
Yeah.
And now we raise kids together. It's like, see, I got you.
Yep.
You
I
know,
knew
like,
all along.
I knew that this is what was best.
Yep.
And God is so good. He is such a great author. And just be reminded and be encouraged that your book is being written and forever changing. And just like we said, it's just a chapter.
It's just a chapter, and
And
you're going to
so-
keep going.
Yeah.
And, I touched a little bit on this the last one, but I have it also on this episode is, so often I tell my girls, because this is a subject that gets brought up a lot, that this is your story too. And so often we think that we're just walking with them, and it's all about them, and it's all doted on them, and they get the care, they get to go away, they get all the things, but this is about you too. And I want to encourage you that God has a story in this for you. When God chose you to walk with whoever you're walking with in this, the loved one, whatever you may be going through, it was for you too, not just them. And so when God chose Katie and Adam, when God chose John and I, God also had mighty plans for me and for Katie outside of our loved one's addiction, outside of the wayward child that you're walking with. God wants to move in your life too. And so many women that I work with feel it's just all about them, and I'm just back here. And that's not true. And that's what the enemy wants you to believe, because he doesn't want you to see what God's doing and what God wants to do in your life. So friends and sisters, brothers, just know that God has a big plan for you in the story, because we know it doesn't look like what you thought.
Yeah.
Like, we know Katie and I sat there and told you that for us, it looked nothing like what we
it.
dreamed of. And so your story is here too.
Yeah.
It's your chapter. It's his chapter. And trust him with the pen. That's the hardest part, is trusting the author, because I like to take away the pen and write
Yeah.
and think that I know better than God, but I don't.
Yeah.
I don't.
It's a good reminder. And the last thing that I'm going to say is there's a verse, Romans 8:28. I'm going to read it to you, and I think it gets taken out of context a lot. So, but I want to, something that I've heard before. It says, as we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And a lot of times, that's Romans 8:28. A lot of times people look at that and say, all things, like everything's going to go good in my life if I love him. Or, but I want to kind of break that down. And if you are chasing hard after God, your thoughts and your ways are going to align with what God's ways and God's heart is. It's not always going to look the way that you want it to look. And so for me, like looking back at that verse, I would have stayed in Knoxville, been with my family. All my friends were there forever.
Yep.
But as I started praying and seeking God and what he wanted for me, my thoughts and my purpose started to align with God's. And he said, no, you're moving to Middle Tennessee. And so he worked out good for me because I loved him and I pursued him.
Yep.
And he gave me a purpose in that.
It's such a good point because, like you said, that verse is so often used out of context with the first part of it.
Yeah.
The first part of
Works
it
all
is like,
things good. Yeah.
everything's going to be great. I love God, and that is not like once you align with him, because God had to change Katie's heart to move here. God had to give her those signs that said, I have a plan for you and it's this way. But if Katie would not have surrendered to him and been aligned with him, she never could have heard that. And she would have missed the whole beauty of what S2L is today and what Hope After Addiction is today. And so that last part, it's funny, the friend I was talking to last night, we talked about that. Like, there's the first part of that, but there's the last part of that. And you have to really focus on the last part to know and to trust that God is going to use it for good when you're in his will.
That's good.
And one thing, I was up at 5:30 this morning just working on this last one, but it's just something that God gave me, just a word, but it's one pinhole of light in the darkness is much more powerful than one pinhole of dark in the light. Say it one more time, because I had to chew on this one. One pinhole of light in the darkness is much more powerful than one pinhole of dark in the light. So no matter where you're at today, no matter where your story is, no matter how dark it is, because we know how dark it can get, focus on that one pinhole of light because it's there. The rainbow that I saw coming home last night that followed me for 55 minutes, that was my pinhole in the darkness that we've been walking in, that God, you are there. And so focus on that, because that little pinhole, that little sign will carry you through everything. When God says, I am right here, just focus on me. Even when nothing looks familiar, nothing looks good, nothing looks like you're going to make it, you are, and you're going to be okay.
That's good. Oh, that's beautiful. That's so good. Well, we hope that you felt encouraged today, knowing that God's not done with your story. We hope that that's an encouragement to you to know that he's got you and he is continually writing your novel.
Yes.
Yeah. It's just a chapter you're living right now, and he is not done with you yet. Yeah. So we hope if you are watching this on YouTube that you will give us a like and a subscribe so that you can know when we release our next one. If you find us on Instagram or Facebook, make sure you share, because that's how we get some of our to other people that might not know that we're around. We hope you have a great day. We hope that you feel blessed, and we'll see you next week. Bye.